tell me a little bit, before we get into everything, tell me a little bit about Thanksgiving with your fams.
Thanksgiving was chaotic, and it was great, I think there was a time when I was trying to really, like when I was younger, I don't know, I have to probably process through this a little bit, but as an immigrant kid, I had some ideal of what like kind of a elegant, refined Thanksgiving dinner is supposed to be, and I always try to make that happen, and my family was just not having it. And then, so yeah, I've like doubled down on our very immigrant, just sort of like um, instant mashed potatoes, but like really amazing turkey that my mom has learned to perfect over the years, and like, ocean spray cranberry jelly, and like no cutlery matching, everyone just sort of like randomly eating all kinds of things. Like, yeah, so it's actually the chaos is really joyful for me. Um, and yeah, it's our version of Thanksgiving. Yeah.
I really appreciate that you said that because you said a few things. You said as an immigrant kid, and then you said like trying to get Thanksgiving the way it's supposed to go. And I think especially when we're younger, there's so much going on. We don't necessarily see that there's this context behind our feelings and behind an effort to try and make things more like what they're supposed to be,
Hmm.
like what American families actually do.
Yeah.
And so I think it's fascinating that you sort of have this intention, this goal, you set out to, I guess, make everything a little more American, but you might not call it that at that particular moment
Hmm.
that that it sort of drives you. It's just
Yeah.
in hindsight you realize, oh, here's the otherism, and here's like how
Mm.
we encountered it. Here's how I, as a young person in particular, responded to it. And now all this time later, I not only uh, I not only respect the otherism, I value the otherism. I value what is uniquely ours here. So I think there's a lot to something like this.
Yeah, and it's interesting the idea of feeling othered. We mean it in specific capacities in kind of the socio-political climate that we find ourselves in now, and it's definitely relevant, needs to be talked about in that capacity. But I feel like being othered and othering is like a very human experience. And so while I was sort of like in this pocket of feeling othered, or maybe even you know colluding in the othering of myself, so I'm like, I describe certain things about what makes my family Thanksgiving like other and not this ideal. Meanwhile, I can imagine somebody who I think of as like, oh, that person's as American as they get or whatever, and they have those experiences as well, in butting up against kind of the ideal or sort of this projected idea of Americanness or normalcy or convention or whatever. There's definitely complex layers there.
So many layers, and of course we are talking about a very layered project
Yeah.
here, something with several dimensions. But
Hmm.
before we get into the project itself, maybe you can tell me a little bit about this place called Koreatown, and how Koreatown is a part of you, or how you're a part of it, and how it figures in what we've just talked about a little in terms of arrival and otherisms, and kind of coming to terms with your role in the middle of it all. Tell me a little
Hmm.
bit about your connection to K-Town and how that relates to an immigrant kid's story.
Um, Gosh, I don't know. I guess I'll just start at the beginning in terms of like timeline. When my parents came to the States, we already had family that had made a home in Koreatown. And so then, my dad has this thing that he says. He's like, as an immigrant, whoever comes to pick you up at the port or the airport, that determines like your American life, you know? And so it was uh, one of my cousins who picked us up. And so yeah, and I think there was like some apartment that he had introduced, like he knew that there was a vacancy there, and it was on like 7th and Catalina or something like that. So that was our first like American home. And then also he worked at a sewing factory, and so that's where my dad worked. And so that's exactly what my dad said is like whoever comes to pick you up is going to sort of dictate a certain aspect of how the trajectory of your journey. And so, yeah, I mean, we started in Koreatown, and yeah, went to school there. I made my first friends there. I'm still kind of unpacking what that actually meant, and it's during the pandemic and like being cooped up in lockdown that I really started. I haven't really kind of come to terms yet. That's an interesting idea. So I feel like I'm still on that journey. And then, my parents were able to build enough resources for us to move to the suburbs, where they felt like it was safer and there was like more space and better education system. But then K-Town was always still like a cultural hub, so we would always come every Sunday for church, and like my mom and dad would do their grocery runs to get all their like Korean things. And um, I mean, we would like come to K-Town all the time. K-Town was just an inevitable part of our lives. Like, I came to Koreatown to get my hair cut. Koreatown was where all the deals were. It's like, you hear about the medical system where, oh my gosh, it's like months out that I can get, an appointment with the doctor. And like in K-Town, you sort of have this like old school way of dealing with people. You just kind of go, oh, come on, just squeeze me in. And then like a doctor will see you. Like one time I had my hand cut, and because my mom has like this amazing network in K-Town, from the time that I cut my hand and had this crazy accident in my driveway to getting it sewn was like 45 minutes, because she knew a doctor in K-Town who like she was able to pull strings and like let me in, So I could go on and on and on about how K-Town is such an integral part of my life. But because I was, trying to figure out what it meant for me to be me, while being seen as other or having assumptions placed on me. I think actually I was trying really hard to not kind of have any sort of representative role of being Korean or Asian, or being associated so closely with Koreatown. Not that I was like ashamed, but I just felt like it was like a forced identity or an assumed. A surprise to me that now in my 40s, I have created this sort of energy um, and connection to Koreatown that I'm happy for people to associate me with certain aspects of K-Town, So that's like a really long non-answer to your question.
That's a really great, not long non-answer to this question. And I also want to just shout out all of those joining us this evening, all of those coming through to wave, to say what's up, to hear a little bit about this project, this collaboration, this teamwork, and
Mm-hmm.
major effort for us in the city of LA. And as I heard you describing this upbringing, Helen, I was struck by your mentioning that your dad actually worked at a sewing factory, because my mom worked at a sewing factory too. So of course these are the places where so many of our families have intersected
Yes.
and like made community and
Mm-hmm.
occupied space slash coexisted together. This is how it's happened, and especially in the 1980s when you had these major influxes of Central American and also Mexican American families and laborers. The sewing factories were some of the only places that were truly available to them. And so I can still remember like taking the bus from East Hollywood to downtown LA to visit mom's factory somewhere off of like, I don't know, San Pedro and 4th Street or
Oh,
something like that. So it's again one of these stories where like there are people in front of us, kind of. There are people who made these journeys before our work, and to a great extent, like we're still, as you were saying, kind of unpacking that and trying to come to terms with just what it might mean.
Hmm. Yeah, I love that. And by the way, my dad worked on, I think he worked at different factories, but the one I remember the most was Olympic in Alameda. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Of
Hmm.
course, of course, the downtown area, the K-town area, just as you said, like this is where so many people clustered, and
Hmm.
where that has continued actually. And so now it's just as lively. It's probably denser than it's ever been. It's more colorful than it's ever been. And so now I think for young professionals like ourselves, there are so many stories to tell in between all of these intersections and in between all of these encounters with one another's cultures. And so I want to ask you a little bit, getting away from K-Town itself and getting into this K-Town is okay, K-Town is Oaxacan-Korean thing going on. Where does that come from, and what is that supposed to mean? I sort of just imagine like a user out there, or I said user,
I know.
somebody scrolling through their feed
Yeah.
and going, I haven't heard from Helen Kim in a while. And then over the last couple of weeks seeing, whoa, there's a shirt, oh my, there's a reel, whoa, this photography, now they're at these stores, there's so much going, and it's all at rapid fire in some instances. And so tell me where that all comes from. What's this about, K-Town is okay?
Thanks for asking that question. I feel like actually I should direct that question to you, um, because it really started with you. But I guess it started with I think our friendship. And like many years ago when we met each other and we started talking, I think we had like an instant recognition, even though we're like in different, we're different ages and different periods and maybe or different um, points in the timeline of like our creative trajectory or careers or whatever. But I think that we recognize like an openness and a bit of like that maybe immigrant hustler mentality, just kind of like go hard. And then, yeah, so I think like the artist mentality with like the work ethic that we saw our parents growing up, that combination can be a little bit insane because we'll just kind of press hard. And yeah, and then just got curiosity and like a real true like love of our city. Because, you know, for folks who are listening in, if ever you start having a conversation with Jimmy, like what you'll find is that he is very informed, very in tune, understands all of the problems, but just inevitably the conversation will become like some sort of like a just euphoric, positive, like love poem to LA, you know? And so I think that's really inspiring. Anyway, so that's like the backstory. But because we had that foundation, when the leaked recordings of the three city council members came out, it might have been like the day after, right, that we had coffee, and so we started talking about that and what that conversation meant. And of course, because Jamie and I have proximity to Koreatown, and that's not even like the main point that people kind of talk about in the general zeitgeist, but we just really zeroed in on how they were talking about Koreatown, both like the absence of the Koreans there. Actually, in general, I feel like there's like an active absence or negligence of like the Asian American population in
Mm.
that conversation that really speaks to just how people see Asian Americans in when they're in power and kind of thinking about city. Anyway, that's like a side thing. But like specific to Koreatown, just kind of like talking, naming in their minds like the absence of Koreans, and then the denigration and just colorism and othering you know, specifically they were saying Oaxacans. And anyway, but because of our experience within our communities with that kind of stratification and othering within the communities and all of those things that happen, I think we just kind of understood these layers. And so we were talking about that. But because I think there is a sense of optimism that you and I both carry, more you, I think, than myself, you had this idea of like, hey, Koreatown is Oaxacan Korean. Like they're joking about that. I mean, that's an actual like name that we pulled from the recording. And so I think Jimmy, you were like, hey, let's just own that and actually celebrate that, and you know, and laugh in the face of being othered and actually turn it on its head and really like celebrate each other and celebrate the other, you know, and kind of maybe even like turn that term of the othering, or not othering, but turn that idea of the other on its head. And you've already written extensively about that, Jimmy. So yeah, so I think it started with the t-shirt, and we didn't have any like other ideas except just to have a t-shirt and just, you know, have fun with that. But I think what it's turning out to be was already kind of there as a sort of a understood manifesto. I'm so sorry. I like talk in monologues, so it's my answers are too long.
Actually, that's why we're friends.
That's so true. That's so true.
That's totally why we're friends. And yeah, go ahead and get your sip of water because I'm gonna I'm gonna hold you to it for a moment. I'm gonna ask you about your design. I'm gonna ask you about your artistry, your design work, and how that figures into this because okay, fine, like K-Town is Oaxacan Korean, sure thing. But then what is your design process after that conversation? And how is it that you go through a few different, say, possibilities and then choose one? What happened there? How did we get to this shirt, which is like, which in the eyes of some, it might be somewhat plain, it might be a little to the point, slightly too direct. How do you get to K-Town is Oaxacan Korean very boldly in the way that you did as an artist, as a designer?
Um, well, I think that for me, while I personally can appreciate you know, different iterations of like artistry and design, for me, when I'm kind of putting things out there, I like for it to be as accessible as possible. And I think you know, having to kind of navigate through all of these like lexicons wherever I go, like in as being like an in-between culture person, like a third culture person, you know, being a woman, being like all of these different things, I feel like there's always navigating of like signifiers and stuff. And so that could be an interesting journey, but I feel like oftentimes there is like sort of a tribalism that can happen with like each group's individual, like its own internal language, its own internal processes. And I don't discount that or think that that is unimportant. But I think for me, my work is to acknowledge that and honor that, but also extend sort of like a way, an accessible way for people to enter into that. You know, and sometimes I enter into it as guests, and sometimes I enter into it as like I'm going to own this. But I kind of want to just try to make things as plain and accessible as possible. Also, I think my aesthetic tends to be more kind of like, okay, let's there's more on the table than we think that we need, you know, and so I'm always trying to pull away. And so there were different iterations of the design where there were some ornate aspects, you know, which I knew were could be attractive and they would make me maybe make the logo feel more kind of comprehensive. But in the end, I sort of, you know, we had a little bit of a, I think, you know, disagreement. And I think that you and I, we were kind of like egoless in our collaboration. So we could have a certain specific thought about something, but it's cool if somebody's like, I disagree. And that was an instance with the design. I think when it was a little bit more ornate, you were more drawn to that. And the reason I kind of pushed back a little bit on the more plainer one was the ornate version that had elements of traditional Mexican and Korean like folk art. I felt like though it looks like a satisfying coming together, it felt a little bit too prescriptive. and it felt a little bit too easy and not exactly how Koreans and Oaxacans coexist in Koreatown.
Wow.
I wanted something, so I didn't want to impose kind of something that looked really pretty and sort of like like resolved on a t-shirt, as if to say, oh, we come together in this really beautiful harmonious way, and like it just felt a little bit too sanitized for me. So I wanted it to be pulled back, and I wanted it to just be about the text itself. So that was the process.
That's so cool, especially because, as you noted at the outset, it's about accessibility. It's about the viewer's ability to interact with what you have placed in front of them. And I think that for me, at least with the work that I'm trying to do more of, accessibility is step one.
Mm-hmm.
And whether or not what you're saying to people is essentially in a format in which they can understand, in a tone with which they can relate, or which they can harmonize, that matters in this
Mm-hmm.
city where things can often feel inaccessible and disengaged and hard to read, hard to navigate through. So I really do appreciate your insight in terms of, hey, let's create something that different kinds of people can engage with and have fun with and do what they please with. Because for me, it becomes more about a beginning and kind of an introduction to an idea rather than an end, rather
Mm-hmm.
than, as you said, a prescription, something that we assign complete meaning for. And so I really like that, because for me, those kinds of projects are the kinds of projects that so many of us can do different things with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's exactly why this project has grown the way that it has, because there's great intention and thoughtfulness, but there isn't sort of this precision of like it has to be prescriptive, like we're using that word, or it has to be control. It has to be in this controlled climate. So you sort of like release it and allow for people to interact with it, and then you allow them that interaction and that relationship really to then dictate what the next step should be. And so here we are, on the precipice of K-Town is okay being not just a t-shirt.
Actually, it's see, that's why we work together. You're thinking what I'm thinking.
Mm-hmm.
You're talking about relations and relationships and how it becomes more than just a material object. Tell me a little bit about what this shirt has done for relationship building, for community engagement, for discussions and getting to know one another. Tell me a little bit about what that process has looked like so far.
I think it has been like an opportunity to, just like the very act of somebody taking a moment to read that text and thinking what that means. It's sort of creating a pause, you know, and injecting a little thought into somebody's mind. And I think when people give me feedback, just to say like, oh, that's an interesting t-shirt, or that made me really think about certain things. And everyone has like different responses. That's kind of what you want, isn't that's what I want as an artist. I don't need for the things that I put out into the world to be seen as art. I just want it to do something in somebody's dialogue with others, or in their personal internal dialogue. So I think that creating that, injecting sort of a little bit of a pause for somebody to sort of like even reflect on what that might mean. I think that's been really cool. But also, I want to also create accessibility into being curious, and so for somebody, for example, in New York, they might not understand what it means. What is K-Town and why is it Oaxacan-Korean, and why those two things together? But like somebody starts asking those questions. And so, I bring up New York because we have a friend who purchased a t-shirt, and she wore it on Thanksgiving for Thanksgiving dinner, and people were asking about that, and she said it was such an amazing opportunity to start talking about her hometown of LA and what happened here, and just the discussions about multiculturalism and diversity and other, all of those kinds of things. And so it's just really been an opportunity for conversations, I think.
Absolutely, and I can say that in my part with the project, I've I've gotten to meet so many new people. I've gotten to visit so many new spaces, and when I've also visited familiar spaces, but
Mm-hmm.
brought along other people, people who have not experienced them in quite the same way, that's been a really exciting part of this too. And
Mm-hmm.
so what you and I have essentially come to at this point, you can correct me if I'm wrong, is that as we go forward, as we go into the new year, we're thinking a little bit about that conversation that your friend had at the dinner table regarding the shirt, where it comes from, what the ownership is about, and so on. And we're thinking that we need to engage in more of these kinds of discussions with folks right inside of K Town. And so that's going to include a range of different people. It's already started us off engaging with folks, especially along this K Town slash Pico Union area.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been something special.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about what is next for K Town is okay. What is next now that the shirt is out, now that the shirt is available at Virtual Normal or via jimbotimes.com?
Mm-hmm.
What else is going on since this appears to be more than just an aesthetic project?
Yeah. Yeah. Quick shout out to Charlie at Virgil Normal. And our shirts are there as well as at jimbotimes.com, like Jimmy said. Um, but so the next steps are that I think we have both of us have a heart for the city and all of the diverse stories that are here. But also I think we have a heart for really like energizing, empowering, and working alongside other creatives and other storytellers. So we have just started the first steps of engaging with local storytellers. Shout out to Melly, who tell stories through photography, but also I think not. I think we're more drawn to people who are not cultivating other people's stories, but are actually allowing for those people to speak for themselves and giving them venues to do that. So we want to start visiting various organizations or businesses in the areas that you just mentioned, K-Town and Pico Union, and yeah, just honoring those people and their experiences through photography and through interviews. And we want to have a curated, sort of like an online zine at ktownisok.com, which is in the works right now, where we get to really do sort of like a beautiful kind of online magazine spread, so to speak, of these people and their stories. I might have missed a couple of things. Jimmy, do you want to add to that?
Well, I think that's great. I think the way you put it is great. What we know that we're doing is we want to reach out to the various kinds of folks who make up this very special part of Los Angeles, and that includes Korean American folks, Oaxacan American folks, and then some, because K-Town is far more than one or two or a few different kinds of folks.
Mm-hmm.
It really sort of ranges in a way that few other parts of the city do,
Yeah.
that few other parts of the country do. And so what I really appreciate about our discussions up to this point has been that we want to speak not only with business owners or prominent figures in K-Town, but we want to speak with youth. We'd like to speak with elders. We want to know how people such as ourselves, but also people slightly adjacent to ourselves, either professionally or socially, engage with this part of the city. And it really is placing a light on K-Town in a way that we know how to do, and in a way that invites others to that dialogue, because we know that it's relevant. We know that it's supposed to educate. We know that it's supposed to be artful and fun and something that everyone can participate in, hence the shirt, and then some. So I just like the sound of that as a fan, as someone who likes the city, someone who enjoys getting to know this place that we all live in and form a part of. For me, it's exciting to think that, oh, the conversation spans further. The
Mm-hmm.
conversation, even just tonight, revealed to me that, like, hey, your dad worked at a sewing factory too, as did my mom. Maybe they were at the same one sometime, or something to that effect, right? Like we may never know, but the fact that we can start bridging conversations towards that space, that for me
Yeah.
is what it comes down to.
Yeah. And I think that bridging is really key. And I think that's like the privilege of, and not that other folks cannot do this, but I feel like being able to bridge, create that bridge is sort of the privileged work that children of immigrants can do, because I think the first generations that have come here, they just had to survive. They had to create a life. They had to, put down roots, and that is very hard, all encompassing work. And I think the thing that I really love about the diversity in Koreatown is that it's very pragmatic. Like people were not like, oh, I want to be thinking about these sort of like progressive ideals. I want to be, making friends with people from different lands. Like they were like, okay, you're my neighbor because you live here. You don't look like me. I don't look like you. Your food smells different. I don't understand what's going on. There's butting of heads. There's, all of those things, but they just like survived next to each other. And just by the very fact that they were coexisting, there became these blending of experiences and foods and cultures and things like that. And so now, us as the kids of those folks who forged that path, we can then celebrate that, and we can sort of then bring that bridge and say, maybe you were just kind of looking at the Korean experience, maybe you were just looking at the Mexican experience, but let's celebrate all of these stories, and then in celebrating the specificity of these stories, we then as the audience can then see the universality in all of these stories and like those connecting points. And to be able to do that for our parents' generation, to be able to do that for the larger audience of Los Angeles is like so exciting. That's one of the things that I get so excited about, like bringing people to K-Town. Just they can see for themselves that it's not like a melting pot in this old-fashioned kind of way that people talk about. Everything becomes like blended, but there is such a, I don't know, there's just like the proximity and the comfortable proximity that everybody has to these different cultures is just really exciting and dynamic.
Wow. It is so exciting. And I want to highlight for us that at the outset of our conversation, we noted that in terms of an origin, a major part, if not the catalyst for this project, was this moment in which our communities were invisibilized, at this moment in which our communities were intentionally unseen or
Mm-hmm.
seen only for these these denigrating these denigrating ideas. And here, on the other hand, what we are doing is saying, actually, what I see is very different.
Mm-hmm.
And what we see happens to illuminate so much and hold such a special place in our heart and in our experience of this complex metropolis. And so actually for me, what's so exciting is like sharing that with other people,
Yeah.
sharing that with the world. In fact, as I think about it, some part of me is already missing the fact that following this project, K-Town won't be as much of a secret, or my relation to K-Town won't be as much of a secret as it has been up to this point, because there's something really intimate about that. And I think for those of us who've come up in this city and who've really um, been on been on this trajectory with this town for so long, there are parts of it, that we sort of relate to at a very visceral level, that we take a pride in relating to so viscerally,
Mm-hmm.
right? When you spot newcomers or folks who are just making their way, there's like a pride almost that's endemic in me, at least, when I can say to them, oh, let me show you a little bit of this place. Let me show you where to get the best boba, or where to get tejate, or where we can basically just sit and chit chat,
Mm-hmm.
because it's cool like that out here. There's a real sort of special relation to that. And here, what we are on the cusp of doing is opening up that box to everybody and saying, hey, like, what's your interaction with it?
Yeah.
So that really is energizing in ways that I think are limitless.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then I think that though then you're inviting some kind of change because you're inviting a lot of other people to have access, right? But that's like the exciting thing, is that we don't want it to just be this precious thing that it's like, um, stuck in some kind of like amber, like fossilized as we only know it. But we're sort of like saying, okay, let's see where this goes, and I guess maybe that's like a lesson in life in general. Like you can't hold anything as like precious and just like static, even if you love it so much. Just everything is constantly changing, and we're, excited to be a part of that, I think.
Yeah, and actually on that note, a shout out to my friend Patty, because recently my friend Patty, who just had a baby
Wow.
a couple months ago. She I haven't gotten to visit her, but we were messaging online a little bit, and then I said, "Hey, I can't wait to meet your daughter. Is there anything I can bring?" And my friend said, "You can bring some tejate." And tejate is this like super specialized indigenous Oaxacan drink, super tasty, and I know exactly where to get it. And my friend said, "Yeah, tejate, because I can tell that you got the plug."
Yeah, you do.
And I was like, "Yes, I got the plug. I'm gonna get you next weekend." So,
Yeah, amazing.
yes, exactly. You share things sometimes so that
Yeah.
others can figure out their relation
Hmm.
to them too, and so that we can all take part in, again, this very human experience, this
Yes,
very human way of engaging with the environment.
I love it. Yeah. So what's next for us, Jimmy?
So what is next for us is essentially this big day that starts tomorrow, because we are closing towards the end of the year. We're closing in on the end of the year, and we have gotten through our Thanksgiving holiday. We're looking at the rest in just a few weeks. But before all of that, there's a way to support projects that we love. Or there's a huge campaign, a global campaign actually, encouraging folks to get involved with projects that can really go the distance, that can really make an impact, and that can really um, take steps towards transforming the environment around us. And so for you and I, then, that means getting donations to support this project, because they have a very specific purpose. Donations for this project are actually supposed to support these very stories.
Hmm.
Stories on the K-Town side, stories on the Pico Union side, stories wherever we can find them. And so it's just a matter of getting a little bit of support so that this project can go the distance as we know it is supposed to do. And that's what we arrived to. That's Giving Tuesday starting tomorrow. And what I'm really happy to note as well is that we've got a really kind of strong framework for accepting these donations. It's kind of not just through Venmo, though that's cool too. Let me know if you would like to donate via Venmo. But we've got a very specific framework through Quienes tu Vecindario, or this small nonprofit that we've got behind the project, because that nonprofit allows donations to be tax deductible, and it also provides this tracking or traceability for donations, and this accountability for what we do with all of the work going forward. And so it's really kind of set up for success. And the sort of final component of that is just getting our community, getting our supporters to pitch in so as to partner with us, so as to make this happen with us.
Yeah. And yeah, I think that we have a really practical, set of needs. So we can be really specific to those who partner with us through the donation, about where their dollars are going to go. We really honor people wanting to partner with us in that way and supporting us in that way. And like we said, it's specifically, to commission photography, to commission the interviews, to honor people for their time and their creativity, to, get hosting for the website, to then do the, work to get the website up and running, and all of the administrative and logistical things that it takes for us to then really, put all of these stories before a larger audience, and also just to activate the larger community, right?
Yeah, and I think for I think what's also true is that, like, in, say, as the children of immigrants, you were saying earlier, we tend to go hard. We tend to fight for every last bit that we can get. And we tend to honor that process through and through again. For me, taking on a campaign like this, doing this fundraising kind of work, that that's about really sort of standing up for what I believe is the worth of
Mm,
what we have going on here. That for me is really about saying, like, this matters, this should be happening, like, we should all be doing it together. It should not be just one person's, one team's, one corner's. Actually, it should be something that a community forms together, and
yes.
that is what the project has been through and through.
Mm-hmm.
And as you noted, we can provide transparency. We want to provide transparency for folks so that they know that, hey, like, we can make it work, we can build things together, and we can do that holding one another accountable in the effort to uplift our collective stories, our collective existence, our
Yes.
collective resistance, more often than not. And so it's a matter of really honoring what I think is a project that and that people should want to participate in, a project that people are going to have fun
Yeah.
participating in. So shout out to all of those who have donated thus far, and for those of you all who might not be able to donate right away, there is still a way to support. And it's really by shouting us out.
Mm-hmm.
It's really by rocking your merch if you have a shirt already. It's really by forwarding some of our communications along to other folks who are in a position to donate at this time. And it's really even by connecting us with grant writers or people who may know or be looking for projects exactly like these. And so there are various ways to support and to be involved. Everyone's time is quite valuable. And
Mm-hmm.
so I appreciate our audience being here tonight. And I know that we are going to make this happen because it's a project more than worth pursuing. It's a timely project for our city, and one that I'm so happy, really, more than anything, to be participating in with you. And I want to thank you for getting us up to this point. I want to thank you for having our back when I've been looking in the other direction. It's so cool. And shout out to Corona, or my boy Ernie, who's also saying that he'll be reaching out, because by all means, let's do it. Let's
Yes.
get
Let's
it.
do this. Let's vamos, let's kaja, let's gamos. So this is like so stupid, but I came up with a little phrase called gamos, which ka means to go in Korean, and then, vamos, let's do it together. So let's gamos. Probably not going to, go anywhere. It's not gonna like become trending or whatever, but still. Anyway, vamos, vamos.
You know what? In this town, if we can make Spanglish happen,
That's
we can
right.
make Koreanish happen. So,
Yes.
hey,
Yeah,
sky's the limit out
that's
here.
right. Yeah. That was such a stupid way to end it, but yeah, and thank you to everybody who's been buying the teas. That's so amazing. Shout out to you guys.
Yeah, shout out to you. And if you've bought a tea but you haven't submitted a photo with your tea yet, hey, we're looking for photos, y'all.
Yeah.
Just FYI. If you've got a tea already and you have worn it or you plan to wear it and you're kind of scared of getting a stain on it because it's white, I know I've felt that way a couple of times. Hey, don't worry about it. Rock your shirt, send us a
Yeah.
photo. We're organizing so that we can put this on a little portfolio
Mm-hmm.
for more audiences to engage with. Your shirt matters, and you're wearing your shirt can go a long way. So do not hesitate to submit those photos to us, because we're loving it. We're loving seeing
Yeah.
this grow, and we're loving the process of seeing this grow, and we are amazed each time someone takes a moment to shout out their support for this. So really, by all means, get in touch with us, stay in touch with us. We know that we're going to keep making this work for the city, because that's how it's supposed to be. So
Mm.
really, cheers to everybody in attendance tonight. And yes, you're going to be seeing more from us. Just FYI, you're going to see
Yeah.
more flyers, more shout outs, more vids, more galleries, because we've been up to a lot, and it's going to stay that way for a minute because it's worth it.
Yes. Yeah, it's amazing. Yeah, it's really dope. Thanks, Jimmy.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you, everybody, again this evening. And if you didn't catch the whole convo, just so you know, we're going to publish it via my podcast. You can find the podcast when you type in Jimbo Times on either Apple or Spotify or Google Podcasts. And we will have this there for your reference. Thank you once again for joining us this evening. It's been such a pleasure. And Helen, I will chat with you soon. I will chat with you before long. I got a feeling I'll chat with you right after this
Yeah, I know.
because why not? So, really, yes, have a good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We wish you a great work week and then some. And shout out Giving Tuesday that starts tomorrow. You'll be seeing it from us, no doubt.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.